The dust of Cedar Creek settled thick on everything that day, a fine brown powder coating shame and judgment alike. The afternoon train had just hissed its arrival, but no one was watching it. All eyes were on the small wooden platform in front of the sheriff's office. A woman stood there. Her name was Eleanor Vance. She was a widow, new to the territory and accused of stealing bread from Miller's Mercantile. She wasn't bound or shackled, but the stares of the townsfolk held her tighter than any rope could. The crowd was a quiet one, which was worse than a loud one. There was a coldness in their silence. Mr. Miller stood by the door of his shop, arms crossed, his face a mask of self-righteousness. Sheriff Brody, a man worn down by the years and the sun, leaned against the platform's post, looking at his boots anywhere but at her. He told her to stand there just for an hour as a lesson, a public shaming. Eleanor's face was pale, her gaze fixed on the distant line where the prairie met the sky. She clutched a worn satchel to her chest, her knuckles white. Children, sensing the adult tension, stopped their games and watched with wide, curious eyes. The whispers were like the rustle of dry leaves, carrying judgment on the wind. A lone rider approached from the west end of town. He wasn't a lawman or a gunslinger, just a rancher named Silas Cole. He was a quiet man, known more for his sturdy fences and fine horses than for his words. He reined in his horse near the livery, his eyes taking in the scene. He saw Eleanor standing alone against a silent tide of accusation. He saw the sheriff's discomfort and Miller's pride. He swung down from his saddle, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He didn't look at the crowd. His focus was singular. Silas walked straight to the platform. The dust barely rose from his steady footfalls. He stopped a few feet from the sheriff. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "That's enough," he said. The words were simple, cutting through the thick air of condemnation. Sheriff Brody looked up, surprised. "Silas, this is town business." "Not like this," Silas replied, his gaze finally shifting to Eleanor. He didn't offer a smile or a comforting gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement. He looked back at the sheriff. "Not here." A murmur went through the crowd. Who was Silas Cole to interfere? Mr. Miller took a step forward. "She stole from my store, Cole. There are consequences for thievery." Silas turned his head slowly to face Miller. His expression didn't change, but a new hardness settled in his eyes. "Then the law can handle it. This is something else." He took another step, placing himself between the crowd and the woman on the platform. "Let her be." The three short phrases hung in the air, each one a stone dropped into a still pond. The authority in his voice was not one of law or violence, but of simple, unshakable conviction. Sheriff Brody shifted his weight. He was a man who understood the unspoken rules of the frontier. And he knew a line had been crossed first by the shaming, and now by this challenge to it. He looked at Eleanor's trembling shoulders, at the hardened faces in the crowd, and then at Silas, standing like a solitary rock. Slowly, the sheriff pushed himself off the post. He walked over to Miller. "He's right, Jebediah. This isn't the way." He gestured toward the woman. "Go on home, Mrs. Vance." Eleanor didn't move at first, as if she couldn't believe it was over. Her eyes met Silas's for a fleeting moment, a silent exchange of something too profound for words. Then, clutching her satchel, she stepped down from the platform. The crowd parted for her, not out of kindness, but out of a new uncertainty. Their judgment had been challenged, and it left them unsettled. They watched her walk away, her steps growing steadier with every footfall until she turned the corner and was gone. The cost was immediately clear. Miller glared at Silas, a look that promised future trouble. Several townsfolk shook their heads and muttered as they dispersed, their afternoon's entertainment cut short. The spectacle was over, but the memory would linger. Silas paid it no mind. He nodded once to the sheriff, a gesture of grim understanding, and turned back toward his horse. He didn't wait for thanks or seek any approval. His work was done. Later that evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, Silas sat on the porch of his small ranch house, looking out over his land. He wasn't a hero. He hadn't fired a gun or thrown a punch. He had simply spoken a truth that everyone knew, but no one was willing to say. He'd seen a soul being ground into the dust and decided it was wrong. He thought of the woman's face, not of her guilt or innocence, but of the stark loneliness he saw there. The next Sunday, Eleanor Vance was at the small-town church. She sat in the back pew, alone. When the collection plate was passed, she placed a small, carefully folded bill inside, more than enough to cover the cost of a loaf of bread. After the service, Silas saw her leaving. He was standing by the door, talking to the preacher. Their eyes met again. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He returned it. No words were needed. Dignity had been restored, not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet act of decency. Out here on the frontier, where life was hard and justice often harder, you learned that some things were worth more than a man's reputation or a town's judgment. You learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was to stand up and say, "That's enough." Because in the vast, unforgiving quiet of the West, mercy often outlasted shame. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more tales from the American frontier.